Sharing our stories makes us stronger and brings us closer together. So, here's to the strong women. May we know them, the podcast. I'm your host, Megan Lucas. I'm a coach, a published author, and a speaker, but more so I like to create spaces for the messy parts of our stories to be celebrated and supported, because we are stronger together. Today, Hillary talks to us about what it was like being a new mom during the pandemic and how she came out of postpartum depression by showing up raw and real in her life. A quick note before we dive into the episode here. Motherhood is a journey that is unique and specific to all who walk the walk. It's also something that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about in terms of what you should do if you want to be a good mom. This is not the place to spew those shoulds like they are gospel. This is not the place to hop in the comments and say something to criticize or invalidate anyone's experience of motherhood, let alone my guest today as she shares about a really tough season in a really brave way. This is the place for you, however, if you'd like to be curious about those shoulds, if you'd like to explore why you feel challenged or protective of them, and if so, welcome, you're in the right place. These are the kinds of conversations this podcast was created to have, ones that turn up the volume on taboo topics that are more frequently discussed only in whispers or not at all. And not because that was the wrong way to do it, but because many of us, men and women, have realized that living life dancing around hard conversation in an effort to prevent a mess usually leads to a bigger mess anyway, and it's just not sustainable. So that's what we're committed to doing here. I'm saying this now at the top of this episode to remind you of the container in which this show exists. Clear is kind and Mama Bear is activated because I am hella committed to this being a safe space for my guests to open up. In closing, I'll add that our discussion today speaks to postpartum depression, and there are a couple additional resources in the show notes that we didn't mention while recording. So please, please, please check those out if you are in need of support or know someone in need of support. Enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone, to the May We Know Them podcast. I'm your host, Megan Lucas. I'm excited for you to be here with us today. We're going to have a really, really powerful conversation. I say that about all of them, but it's true every single time. My ask of you today while you're here, whether you're here live or you're listening to the recording of this, is to have something nearby that you can write on, napkin, Post-it, notebook, and jot down anything that stands out to you in what our guest Hillary, who I'll tell you about in a second, what she shares today. If it's something that you really resonate with and you're nodding your head along, you're like, yep, that's me, girl. Thanks for saying so. Like, I feel seen. Great. If it's something that causes you to make a little face like, oh, what are you talking about? Or challenges you, write that down too. Just trust that you were meant to hear that today for some reason. What jumps out at you today might not actually hit you for 2 weeks, a month, and that's okay. Let me tell you a little bit about Hillary. My experience of Hillary, and I think anybody who spends probably about 30 seconds with her, Hillary's like the sun. She is warm. She just invites you in. Like, it's just like this really cozy feeling. She's just got such a genuine nature to her. And I think anybody who's around her just wants to be more leaned in and closer to her. And it's really cool because the conversation we're going to have today, the topic is actually not like a cozy, feel good thing all the time. And yet I'm so leaned in and excited to have it with her. She's got this magnetic energy. And I'm sure there are people listening like, yep, that's our Hillary. That's her for sure. So Hillary, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was the sweetest thing.
So the conversation, the big overarching topic we're discussing today is motherhood in the pandemic. Who would have thought you'd ever have to like deal with something, go through something like that, as if becoming a new mother isn't challenging enough. Hillary's going to be sharing some ahas, some breakthroughs, some things that occurred to her through the mess of it, through the struggle of it. Before we get to like the big lesson, the moral of the story here, Hillary, set us up a little bit as far as the timing. Like, I think we all know where we were when we heard, hey, we're going to shut down the world
clue us in as far as like, where were you in your pregnancy at that point? Like, just where was your headspace at, your health? Like, catch us up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards to timing, so Landon was born in February 2020. And just a cool thing about his birthday, February 2nd, 2020. So when it's backwards, he's like technically a palindrome baby.
Oh, cute.
And he was born at 2:02 a.m. in delivery room number 2. So 2, needless to say, is now my new number forever. So it was literally, I had him February 2nd, was in the hospital for, I think it was two days. Came home, started to get settled in, getting the dogs used to their new sibling. And we're just settling in, getting used to being a new mom, for my husband being a new dad, this new reality, right? So a few weeks go by. So we're now in early March, and there's this little talk going on about this huge, like, flu-like thing that's now entering the States. And this is in the midst of introducing Landon to family, starting to get out of the house, starting to introduce him to people. People were visiting. And then this flu-like sickness starts creeping in. And we're like, oh, this is weird. Like, what is this? And then I think, gosh, it was a matter of probably several weeks after that, it became real. It became a huge problem. The shutdown happened. So I literally went from having my first child, coming home, being on maternity leave, dealing with all of the normalness of, being a new mom. And then the world shut down. And I was being told, can't go anywhere, can't see anybody. We weren't sure if we were even going to be able to get groceries from the grocery store. We weren't sure what was going to be shut down, who was going to, were we able to go back to work? It was just a mystery, like a huge mystery. So yeah, literally go from new mom, facing that new reality, being on maternity leave, having this new identity. And now it's like, just kidding. You're isolated. You can't see anybody, can't do anything, can't go back to work. Now you have to work from home. So yeah, it was definitely just that typical, like, not roller coaster, but it was a roller coaster. Yeah. It was just the domino.
It's like a roller coaster that people are throwing things at you while you're on it. Like,
right.
Because
like, see if you can catch this. Yeah.
And there's so many elements here. Like, there's the isolation, right? Like that alone, when there's a new baby brought in, it's just like, what? But also, like, just the fear of the state of the world. Like, can we get groceries? Like, basic things that we need. What's the status? Like, what does work look like for here? Will there be work? Just lots of, I don't know. And taking it day by day. And I remember at that time people saying, we'll be back to normal in a month.
Right.
Right. And then it just kept not happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that alone, if anybody can put themselves in those shoes, if you can imagine that, also, like, your body's doing things, like, all of that, and just
that is something that is never talked about. Let's just say that, like, it's the recovery, never talked about. You go from society telling you, oh my gosh, you're a new mom, it's such a beautiful experience. And don't get me wrong, I loved being pregnant. I loved it. People thought I was crazy. Like, I loved being pregnant. I had a very smooth pregnancy, thank you, Jesus. But like, I just loved it. Like, I thrived on it. But society is, it's such a beautiful journey. You're this new mom, you have this new bundle of joy. It's amazing. no one tells you what it's going to be like when you get home from the hospital, when you don't have the nurses by your side on the hour, every hour. Like, you go home and your mind has to recover, because you're like, oh my gosh, I have a new role that I've never had before. This is scary. And then you're like, wait a minute. Now I like physically have to recover. I can barely walk. Scared to go to the bathroom. I mean, like, we're just raw. I mean, y'all know raw and real is my thing. So it's like, it's crazy. And nobody coaches you through that. Nobody tells you about those things because it's all so taboo. People don't want to talk about those things because it's icky. It's awkward. It's cringy. But you have to. Like, you have to have that support from other new moms to talk about that stuff, because that's the reality of what you're going to be dealing with when you go home. You have to like have that heads up. That would have been so important to me, to just have the heads up of like, hey girl, this is the stuff you're going to be dealing with when you get home.
Yeah, because there's a like a blindsided nature of it that I know for me, I was pissed. I was like, why didn't anyone prep me on this part of this, you know? And it's and you and I are similar in that, like, we're not gatekeepers of things. Like, if we find, you know, whether it's a song or a product, or like, hey, people, you need to know about this. So like, I know I took it pretty personally. But what you're saying here about like needing to educate people on that, like, I hear where you are with it now, but tell me a little bit about like when you were in that season and then the world kind of like collapsing down on you. Like, it's a really like profound, and like, I'm like raising people who are listening can't see me, my hands, but I'm like giving like a fist pump here, like, yes, like we need that. And yet I'm just guessing that wasn't an immediate aha for you. So tell me a little bit about like what was going on in your mind, in your heart, like the experience, because, you know, did it get worse before it got better? Like, what actually brought you to that aha moment?
So when I was right after Landon was born, you know, new mom, first child, you try to do all of the things that you're quote unquote supposed to do, right? So I did try the whole breastfeeding thing. Did not work. He would not latch. It was miserable. You know, every time I did have I went to consultations at my doctor to try and help me through it. And we were dealing with, he would never latch at home. It was a nightmare at home. Soon as I walked into the doctor's office, got a little bit of coaching, boom, he latched. And she just kind of looked at me like, oh, he's doing great. I said, yeah, for you, I guess teacher's pet, he's showing off, because this doesn't happen at home. And I got to the point with the breastfeeding woes. I got to the 2-month mark, tried to do it as long as I possibly could, tried to hold on as long as I could, made it to 2 months. But the overwhelming factor of just constantly being a robot and having to pump, like, again, on the hour, every hour, I was exhausted. I was mentally tapped. I felt like a failure. You know, you start having all of these feelings like, I'm the mom. I'm supposed to provide for my son. Why is this not happening? Like, why can't I do it? So once I got to the 2-month mark, just couldn't mentally handle it anymore. That's when I started to really kind of, my anxiety started rearing its ugly head. I've had anxiety for 13 years now. And so that started rearing its ugly head. And then it kind of just came into fruition with the postpartum starting. So that was when the postpartum depression jump started, was when I decided we're going to formula. You know, it's just not mentally worth it. I know he'll be fine on formula. Yeah. He's going to be healthy. He's going to get the nutrition he needs. I kind of just put that on the back burner, all of those worries. And I just moved on to the next step. I said, this is what works for us. This is what's going to happen. But that is what jump-started my postpartum depression.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah. So, kind of just, I want to say the next two years, I think it was, give or take, 2.5, give or take. I just was dealing with it. Just simultaneously living my life, and I was just living with it. Yeah. That's it.
I don't want to jump over that. 2 years, not 2 months, not 2 years. Yeah. Okay, continue. Just want to make sure people heard that.
Yeah, 2 years where I just I said, okay, this is my new reality. And I just dealt with it. I tried to be superhero, again, kind of fitting into that mold of what society tells you. Oh, you're a mom now. It's time to suck it up. Like, sorry, there's no more taking care of yourself. You have to take care of this.
It's just what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. So sorry, you can't take care of yourself. So it was 2 years of just bearing it, not doing anything to, I had accepted it, but there was no tackling it. I had accepted it, but I wasn't tackling it. So I wasn't doing what I needed to do to really deal with it. And then that's when everything kind of, I was just kind of doing some soul searching along the way. And I thought to myself, 1 in 8 women, when I started doing my research, 1 in 8 women will suffer from postpartum depression. And it can start in your pregnancy, or it could start afterwards. And the wild thing about it is not only that factor of 1 in 8 women will suffer from it, but it could last up to 7 years or longer after having your child. And I'm like, what? like that's insane. That is a lot to hold on to. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's just, that's when I started realizing, oh my gosh, there's a lot more people that go through this. And the only kind of backtracking, the only postpartum depression that I had experienced before I was even a mom and before it, hit me, was my sister dealt with it when she had her son. And so I got a glimpse into it and I knew about it. Right. But at that point, I was in my early 20s. I wasn't thinking about being a mom yet. I wasn't thinking about getting married. I wasn't thinking about any of those big, life things that you do. And so I just saw it as oh gosh, this is a terrible thing that somebody that I love is dealing with. Yeah. And then it hit me. And then at that point, I thought to myself, there's a lot of people who deal with this, and there's a lot that's not being talked about. How can I be a voice? How can I be of support? How can I share my journey to help other people? Yeah.
Which, knowing you, I feel like you're so connected, just as an energy. I feel like community is something I think of with you. When you ask yourself that question, how can I help be a voice here? How can I spread the word about this? In my head, what just went off is oh, there's Hillary. That's her. So tell me a little bit about, once you asked yourself that question, you took action on it. So what did you do from there?
So we live in a world of social media is everywhere. I have, a lot of people, I'm sure, I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
Yes. Everybody listening just nodded their heads. Yes.
More love than hate, but I do have the typical love-hate relationship with social media. And I think it's because, like any other female, human being out there, you have your own insecurities, comparing your life to somebody else's. And so that's what I had such a hard time with social media, because people were constantly only posting the good stuff, the good days with their kids, the achievements, you know, which is all wonderful. I love seeing all of that stuff. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was seeing only that. And I thought to myself, because I started getting trapped in, oh my gosh, she's such a good mom.
Yeah.
Like, she's always so cute. She's got her makeup done. She's got, you know, she's doesn't have sweatpants or, you know, yoga pants on, if that's even a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm dating myself, going back to like 2004. But I started getting into that trap of, she's got it all together. How does she do it? Like, I'm driving the hot mess express over here. I barely shower. Like, I can barely get myself in the shower. How does she do it? And I thought to myself, no, don't do it. Don't fall into that trap, because you know, she has just as many bad days as you do.
Good for you.
She's just not sharing it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I said, you know what? I'm going to thrive off of me being a hot mess express. I'm going to thrive off of me being a huge goofball. I'm going to thrive on wearing hardly any makeup ever. My hair's not done. I mean, I did blow dry it for y'all today. But I'm just going to thrive off of this hot mess express attitude, because that's what it is. We're all just trying to keep it together. We're all just trying to take one step at a time. And so at that moment, that's where my real and raw came from. And I said, you know what? I'm going to create this community, on social media. I'm going to start this community for moms or whoever wants to join. And I'm going to let them know that they are not alone. Yeah. They are, just the fact of them getting up every day and just doing it, it's enough. It's enough. You don't have to look your best while you're doing it. You don't have to be perfect while doing it, because nobody's perfect. I just wanted to get that idea of, when somebody comes to my social media page, they can be like, oh, she's just normal. Yeah. She's normal. She's just like me. And she's letting me know that you don't have to fall into that trap of, oh, I'm just a mom. Like, you have so many other roles that you were before you were a mom. They're not gone. They're still there. You may have, put them in timeout for a little bit,
put them on the back burner. Yeah.
Right. But they're still there, and they still make up a huge part of who you are as a person. And there is that concept of getting to know that person again. And even though this is your new reality of being a mom, you're still a friend. You're still, an employee, or you own your own business, or you're a sister, a daughter,
songs you like to listen to that aren't kids songs, like other interests,
right?
Besides, what playground you're taking your kids to. Like, there's actually so much more to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I hear like two things that are rebellious there. One is like the showing up raw and real as a, like, for me, I know, like, because I show up in the same way. It's self-expression. Like, I feel seen. Like, I'm not pretending. Here I am, and to connect with others in that way, where they're like, oh, thank God. Like, it's like an exhale, that's a really beautiful experience. Like, to normalize the fact that we are all, more often than not, barely hanging on by a thread. Add to it, like, the state of the world, both pandemic and then other things that have happened since, that just, like, where do you find the words? So there's that. But then also the other rebellious thing, or just kind of like uncommon thing you hear is, so many people, and not that it isn't this, like motherhood is such a beautiful, beautiful, important role. And there is a belief there around like self-sacrifice and all of that. Like I get that. And of course we're going to do what we need to do for our kids. Hands down, like crawl through glass. We would do it. And yet we are so multifaceted, and actually allowing yourself to embrace the other parts of you is, I mean, that's self-care. That's like just spending some time like remembering that you're a woman first who likes to do this, that, and the other thing. It actually makes us better for our kids, for our jobs, for our partners, for our friends, because we're doing the things that serve us. So hell yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Like show up that way, because it changes the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm all for it, because I think naturally as women, we're very nurturing and look to who we need to take care of and who needs what, so often that we aren't even connected to what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So to turn the spotlight back on you, yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cliche, but you truly cannot take care of anybody else until you take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just can't. And it's very cliche, and people are like, oh yeah, totally heard that before, whatever, it's fine, I'll just suffer through it. And I think back to very specific situations that I was finding myself in throughout, my newly found postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
It was just small things, not getting in the shower, not eating, not going outside to just get some fresh air, sitting in the same clothes for days, not having a routine. That was huge. I just let my routine go, especially working from home during the pandemic and had a newborn. Totally let routine just fly right out the window. But I was having these bursts of anger.
Yeah.
It's Landon. I mean, there was one point where I was holding him and he was crying and couldn't get him to go to sleep. And I had the boppy underneath him. Mm-hmm. And this is probably going to make people like cringe, but I had the boppy underneath him and I just grabbed the boppy, and I'm obviously still holding my kid, but I threw the boppy across the nursery.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just pissed. I was
just had to let it out somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember clear as day, CJ came in and he just kind of looked at me, stopped, and he said, I'm going to take the baby now. And I was like, thanks. I was like, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. And I got up, he took Landon. I got up and I went into the bathroom and I just sobbed. I sobbed because then you have this reaction. You're out of the reaction. You remove yourself from the situation. You're now alone and you're now stewing in it.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mom. You start to feel guilty. What's wrong with me? I should be able to control my anger.
All the shoulds. Oh, yeah.
All the what ifs, all of the, oh my gosh, what if I didn't throw the boppy? What if I threw my kid? Do you know what I mean? Like it might sound crazy to some people, but that's the reality.
Like, yeah.
That's real life. And, you go from, probably very similar to just depression in itself. You go from being on a high and being like, oh my gosh, I'm awesome. This is great. I'm having a great day. And then one little thing could trigger something.
Yeah. And
it's just like the plane's going down. Like everything.
The roller coaster you talked about, and you mentioned routine.
Yeah.
I mean, any routine you get in, like anybody who's had a child knows this, it changes like every 2 weeks. So you can't really get into a routine there either. So even once you feel like you've gotten to a point like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then I'm going to shower and take a moment to myself. No, plot twist.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always some growth spurt or sleep regression or, neighbor doing construction that you didn't know was going to happen. Like life just throws these curveballs. So it's one of those things where like if you're somebody who likes a plan and structure, buckle up.
Right.
The thing I want to point out here too is super proud of you and like inspired by prioritizing yourself, right? Like taking time for you and all that. And I think people who've been in this position would also agree that like that doesn't mean it's easy. Like there's such a duality here of all of it, really. Like being with your kid and loving it and not being able to wait another second until it's bedtime, or being so tapped out but also like wanting to connect, like things that just actually butt heads against each other. And that's the experience of all of it. So tell us a little bit here about, speak to, you've had this aha, you've created this community. Like what started happening for you? What were you noticing like once you did that?
So I kind of treated it as, my thought process was I want to create this community with, dear mom bestie. Go on Instagram first, use that as, my main source of community at the moment. So that was really the main thing, was creating this community where women can come and just know that they're not alone. They are still everything that they were before they were a mom. And now they're just so much more, right? And just the nuances of, the day-to-day, adding humor to the really, really crappy days, right? And, kind of thriving on like my, hey, welcome to the Hot Mess Express. Like we would love to have you here. Like you're invited to the
all aboard, literally.
Yeah, exactly. All aboard. But then I really found that while I'm creating this community and while I'm, trying my best to be this support system and, a way for women to, somewhere for women to go to get support and just to know that they're not alone, it really became like an outlet for me.
Yeah.
At the same time. And so then I'm tapping into my creative juices. I'm tapping into, the writer in me, I'm tapping into like my humor again, like me being a goofball. Like I'm tapping into all of these different parts of myself to create this community. And so it really became, or it's becoming, because I mean, gosh, I just really kind of took the plunge like a couple months ago. But it's just really becoming not only the communities, it's slowly building, but it's an outlet for me to remind myself of, wait a minute, yeah, you did start here and you've gone through the motions, right? Of being a pandemic mom, dealing with the postpartum depression, and then, doing what you need to do as a person to be a better mom. I just threw in the towel and I said, you know what? It's time for therapy. It's time for you to go to therapy. And so I finally ripped the Band-Aid off there, just trying to do everything that I needed to do to better myself and help myself go through this new chapter of my life, all amongst, creating the community to help other people at the same time.
Yeah, that piece about the self-expression. I mean, you hear anybody who's going through anything, like the advice is like, hey, journal, talk to someone, like all of it. But to do it in such a fun way, I mean, it can be fun, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard people say, like as far as the writer in you, when it comes to writing, like write for you first, like write the book for you first, write whatever it is for you first. And for me, when I do some things on social media, a lot of times, shoulds come in, like as a coach, what should I say? What's inspirational? And I'll edit, like as I'm writing, if I write anything that's from a lens of like you or like universal we, like we need to do, I'm like, this is some BS. Hold on. let me change all that to I and me. Like, what's the thing I'm going through? What's the thing that impacts me here? And let me speak from that lens. And it's always more impactful, both in like engagement. I get, people saying, oh yeah, like I resonate with that. And also I feel better because I feel like I actually spoke to the thing versus speaking above it and trying to make a lesson out of it for people, but actually not showing up raw and real.
Right.
So, pretend. It's still more pretend. So yeah, I really, for anyone listening, whatever you're going through, I'm just going to assume you're going through something because you're a human in the world today. The more you can just let that out somehow, social media, writing, painting, go in a safe space, smash some plates, like whatever it is.
Gosh, I want to do that for so long. I need to go to one of those places.
We'll set that up. It's a way of getting the stress out of your body. It's also a way of, like, sometimes the things that we're saying to ourselves in our heads sound different, feel different, have a different impact when we actually let them out and then hear them. Like, oh, that's so silly, or it just loses their power. So I'm all for it. Self-expression like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's been times when, because you fall into the trap of, oh my gosh, what's going to get the most views? What's going to, reach the most people, going into that social media mode, you fall into all of the things that they say, right? All of the rules, all of the algorithms, it all is just way too much for me to pay attention to. It overwhelms me to my core. But you get trapped by all of that and you start overthinking it. And so I found that when I would sit with a post, I would just sit for a few minutes and just say, like, look at the picture, or, watch back the reel that I made, over and over and over again, and just kind of put myself back to when I was making it or when I was taking the picture, and like what I was feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
What's the message I'm trying to get across with this specific content? And, most of the time I end up writing stuff that I've been keeping in my head for too long. And I end up writing a message that I need to hear myself.
Yes.
Like 100%. 100%.
Well, Hillary, so the nature of the podcast is, may we know them, the strong women, may we know them. So talk to us a little bit about, are there people that you look to for inspiration, people that have supported you and like, yeah, girl, raw and real, like, let's get out loud about it. Who do we need to know to put more voices in this conversation?
Oh God. I mean, a lot of the time when it comes to just mom support, I mean, I go like immediately, like right to the people that I know, the people who, whether it be like my sisters or my mom or, friends at work. I think it's so important to know other mom stories and just kind of, just be open about your journey as a mom, because everybody's looks different. Right. So I think just having those conversations that seem to be so taboo, but are extremely important, literally with the moms that that you're with day in and day out. I mean, those conversations itself can be super, super impactful. Like super impactful. I'm still trying to find, and maybe that's, kind of what I'm doing with Dear Mom Bestie. Maybe I can be that person for other postpartum moms, but I haven't found like another person really speaking out and talking about postpartum depression the way that I'm trying to. And so when I wasn't really, because you go on social media and you search it, there's not a lot that comes up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like the mom humor, which I love. I love that. Just making ridiculous things out of the days that, day in and day out. But there wasn't really a lot for postpartum depression itself.
Which hopefully changes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just speaks so much to who you are, Hillary, because, we can go out and try to find the things that we need. It's a whole other thing to create it when you don't find it. And that's a really beautiful way to give back. There are amazing people who are here live with us, and I want to give them the opportunity to come off mute. Again, if something jumped out at you from this conversation that you just want to co-sign here or speak to, or just share something from your experience, feel free to come off mute now.
I think a lot of things really resonated with me, but that you said, but I think the whole idea of that you are your own person, and something that I was really lucky with that you kind of lost in that pandemic was like, I had my daughter in 2022 and I had the summer off, which was great because my husband and I are teachers. So it was great to have that extra time. But then I got to go back in the classroom and I wasn't just, mom, wife. I also became Miss King again. So that was like a great outlet for me that I don't always consider as like a lucky thing that I have that maybe other moms don't get, whether they're like, they had their baby in a pandemic or, they get to be stay-at-home moms, which is amazing. But because I'm not a stay-at-home mom, like I was forced back into the role that I played, which I love playing. Like I love being a teacher. And I think I kind of take that for granted sometimes that not everybody gets.
Thanks for saying so, because it highlights, like, there's so many ways you can look at this. Everyone's experience is different. Some people really resent having to go back to work, but it's also, like you said, like, oh, thank goodness. Like I go back to an environment where I actually get to be something more than who I am at home with my children. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I had no other choice. So it was, forced in terms of once I was off maternity leave, me going back to work was walking down the steps to my basement, sitting at my desk and having a newborn do tummy time on the mat, And I mean, the real estate world is the wild, wild west most of the time. And so things are pretty crazy. And, for me, when I finally had the chance to, now granted, don't get me wrong, I had 2 years home with my child, which is huge. I mean, I didn't miss a thing. I didn't miss his first word. I didn't miss his first step when he started crawling. And my husband too. I mean, CJ too. We didn't miss any of that because he was working from home as well because his office didn't go back to work during the pandemic. And so I'm very, very grateful to have had that special time with Landon. But at the same respect, Mama had to go back to the office because I was going crazy. And thank goodness for my wonderful mother, because we started out slow. Landon went to her 2 days a week, which he still does. And, thankfully she's back from being out of town because he missed her very, very much this week. But, he went to her for 2 days a week. And that's when I started. I jumped in, but I jumped in slow. I just went into the baby pool. And I started with the 2 days a week just so I could get my sanity back and so I could get my routine back. So I could be Hillary Dyson, operations manager of the Reuben home team.
Yeah.
Right. And, that was huge. That was huge. I mean, was it exhausting? Heck yeah. It took me a couple weeks to really get used to being back into the office. But then we went full force. And when Landon was 2, he went into daycare. So he did 3 days a week in daycare, 2 days a week with my mom, which he's still on the same schedule. And then I was back 5 days a week. And, there's some days where I'm still grateful for the days where I work from home, but most of the time, over the years, I've become more, as shocking as this might sound, but I've actually become more introverted than my typical extroverted self. So now I like to call myself an extrovert an extroverted introvert because there's those moments where I shut down. Like I get my energy from being around other people and I thrive on that and I love that. But I shut down. So if I
to a point.
if I have too much social going on and it's a day where people are in and out of my office and I need help with this and I need your advice on this and oh, I just want to chat with you for, 20 minutes. If it's a day like that, like I shut down. Totally shut down.
Yeah. And it's the balance of it. Like there's so many like multi-layered things here. Like, being grateful that you can be home with your kid and I need to get out of the house. It's both. And saying both of those things doesn't negate the other. Right. It doesn't make either of them less true. Enjoying being around people and needing to tap out and be isolated, and like not have anyone bug me. Both things can be true. And it's being in the ebbs and flows of that, of trust, like knowing, okay, here's where I'm at today. Here's where I'm at in this moment. This is what I need to do for myself. And the more you can allow yourself to just be fluid like that, the less power those shoulds have when they come in, those pesky things.
I know. They're the worst.
Get them out of here. Oh, well, Hillary, any parting words you want to share with anybody who's going through it? Just, whether it's motherhood, period, but really just like feels like they need to have their shit together. Like,
yeah, no, for sure. I will say, if you're in a season where you think you need outside help, like I can't stress this enough. If you're in a season where you really, no matter what you're going through, if you feel the need that you need outside help, just rip the Band-Aid off and get the therapist, go talk to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever you need. If there's no shame in it, there's no shame. I mean, I can't remember. I started therapy this year. Yes, this year. So I'm really only in it. I've only been in it for several months at this point. But I will tell you the stuff that I'm working through and that is coming up, even besides postpartum depression, motherhood and the pandemic, losing your identity, all of that stuff that comes with being a new mom. It's now allowed me to recognize childhood trauma that I had no clue existed. Like, no clue. Literally just turned 35 years old and I'm working through stuff where I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like, had no idea. And it's that childhood trauma and that stuff that I am working through, it changes you as a mom. Like, it changes you as being a parent now. And so then I'm not only dealing with it to handle it myself and work through it and how it affected me and how it is still affecting me as an adult, but now I have to think about, wow, how is it affecting how I'm a mom and how I'm raising my child and, the ins and outs of it all. So yeah, if you feel like you need the outside help, whether that's therapy or medication or anything to just help you with what you're going through, please do it. Please rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah. Because I should have done it a long, long time ago. And now, it's just my reality. I have to work through stuff that's, been present for a really, really long time. And it's going to take me a long time, right? It's going to take a while to work through all of that. And you're always going to work through it. But just the idea of recognizing it and doing that for yourself, it's huge. It's huge. And it's going to better relationships. It's going to change the person you are. It's really going to help you navigate who you are and why you are the way you are today.
Yeah, instead of just like constantly asking yourself, like, what is wrong with me?
Yes. And just burying it. Like, I've buried stuff for so long. And it's so interesting that I see 5 people on here, you know, other than us, but it's funny that 4 out of the 5 are my family members because, you know, you bury stuff and you don't deal with it. And you just think it's going to go away, and it doesn't go away. Doesn't go away.
It's not on the surface doesn't mean it's not in there.
It's going to creep into it's going to creep into other avenues in your life, and it's just, you know.
And I think like we all reach an age, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna sound old here, but when you're younger you have more energy to shove things down. Like you're able to kind of just muscle through things a little bit more. When you become a new mother, or if you get a promotion at work, like anything where you're highly stressed and you're sleeping less and like your routine's out of whack and you're just not operating at like the same energy, you don't have the same energy, then naturally you're going to be more prone to that stuff's going to come up. Because you actually can't shove it down anymore. Or you've been doing it all to this point where there's no room. Like you can't, there's no room to shove it down.
Hit your ceiling.
So like, hopefully if you're listening to this and you're not a mother and like, but you know what we're talking about, reach out for support. Let's normalize it. Let's normalize it. None of us are machines. None of us should be able to just suck it up. Let's change that narrative now. There's actually a lot of courage and strength in saying, hey, I'm not okay and I need some help.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And it's so funny because Carissa, this is so funny that I like didn't even like put 2 and 2 together, but Carissa chimed in on the chat. And, you know, when I was saying that like, oh, 4 of the people on the, you know, live right now are my family members talking about like childhood trauma and stuff. And she said, and the other one's a therapist. And I'm like, yes, Carissa.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for being here today, for diving into this conversation, for being raw and real. Like that is just so who you are. And I know that's not always easy, like just because that's how you show up in the world, you know, there's still the nerves or things or whatever that come up. So thank you for leaning in and having this conversation with us. We'll link Dear Mom Bestie, like where people can find you in the show notes. For anyone who is catching this replay, like listening to the recording of this, please keep this conversation going in, you know, wherever you're listening to this, put in a comment or somewhere like what stood out to you, even if it's just like, hell yeah, Hillary, you're brave. Like just glad to know you. We'll all appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Please stay tuned for future episodes. And yeah, just so grateful to have this community.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to, you know, be raw and real and open the conversation.
I will hold the microphone for you anytime.
Thank you. You're the best.